All right, welcome back to Make It Share It. This is a podcast where creativity meets courage. And today it's going to be me and Coop riding with you. And am excited to actually get a chance to dive a little deeper into something Coop referenced on some previous episodes, which is his recent work in the studio, working with some artists, creating music, and that transition from being, his day job, which I don't even know how much we talk about, but being in oil and gas, and switching over into a creative, playful world, what that looks like. So I thought it'd be fun just for me to ask him some questions about making and sharing that. So, but let's start with your turning points. No, just kidding.
Well, no, first things first, we miss Lauren, right? We miss LC, but this is the DJ Condition, DJ Rydell show revival of our radio show at Baylor from 20 years ago where me and Kent, oh my goodness. Imagine Kent and I having to play songs, a very limited amount of songs that were approved to be played and had so much time to fill. We did bits, we did voices, we did anything we could to buy 5 more minutes on the air. And so this feels like that. It's the revival of the old radio show at KWBU.
There it is, so I love it. For that one guy who listened and was frustrated with us that called in. Welcome back.
Oh, he's loving it right now.
I was just shocked that anybody was listening, and then it happened to be a guy who was frustrated. So
yeah, when the phone would ring, I was like, surely he dialed the wrong number.
Yeah. I was like, oh no, this isn't Domino's, man. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy.
Okay. Well, yeah. So let's, I think, start with maybe that transition. So what is it like to just, you've got a day job, and you've got all the family responsibilities, a wife and 2 daughters and just that world. Take me through as you're going into the making part with these artists. Like, what does it look like to shift from that world into the music world?
So one of the things I've learned in like the last 10 years of working with artists that I would say do this at a high level for a living is when they decide to go into the studio, like we are in production mode, and that is the crux of how they make money. They're going to record, release music, and then go on tour. They don't mess around. I've been on a lot of studios where my own bands or church bands, and it's very laid back, and the creative process is like, hey, what should we work on today? This is showing up to the studio with 40 completed demos is what some of these artists do. So some of their biggest problem is how do we find 10 songs in this and then make them the best 10 we can get. So I've learned that you have to kind of show up with that same kind of work ethic. I can't show up and go, hey, I'm the weird noises guy. What weird noises do you need from me today? I have to show up with a game plan. I usually show up with a hard drive full of noises and drum loops and ideas. I bring gear that I know no one else has, or if they do, they're my kindred spirit. Like I do guitar pedals from the 90s, stuff that I've modded because I found a Reddit thing that a guy sells, parts that you can solder yourself and make new pedals. I mean, I'm so nerdy in that way. And so I bring all this stuff. And so that's what the pre-production side, when you talk about having a job and a family, that's the hardest part. Finding enough time, because I think anyone can manage like, an early morning hour. Let me tell you, writing music at 6 a.m. is impossible for me. And I think most creatives, we didn't get into this business to wake up at 6 a.m. and make music. So that's off the table. It's not like my quiet time. And plus, I'm really loud and obnoxious when I'm trying to find noises, because 80% of the time it's unlistenable to me who's doing it. So I imagine anyone else just thinks something is being slaughtered or a fire alarm has gone awry. That means I'm on the right track, but I'm not there yet. And so I need chunks of time. It'd be like trying to write a book 45 minutes at a time. It's not gonna happen. It's going to feel really fragmented and be really frustrating. So it's finding time in the months leading up to it. And then I have a lot of philosophies there. I don't like to listen to new music when I'm doing that. and I don't like to listen to the artist's music. So I go into my kind of catalog and I I walk through I walk through this with other artists like that are about to go into the studio. I don't think you want to be listening to anything new because it creeps into your head, and then you have these like Sabrina Carpenter and Olivia Rodrigo things in your head, and you just don't want that creeping in. Those melodies, those sounds. Yeah. So I want that off the table. And then I don't want to hear anything that the artist has done recently or in the past for the same reasons. I don't want to show up and try to recreate the wheel of like making their last album or thinking that that's what they want to do again. I like to go in with a clean slate and have a conversation of like, what's this album about? What are you trying to say? What do you want it to sound like? And not go in going, oh, well, the last album was XYZ. So I worked on a lot of XYZ. So I listened to what were the albums I loved in elementary school? What were my favorite albums from junior high? What's the albums I remembered and listened to the most in high school, college, early marriage? Like I always have this like questionnaire because they're the songs at the end of the day that made me want to do music. So I tell people I didn't really have a chance to not be a musician. And I think a lot of people in my generation are the same way because I was 12 years old. I'd already been playing piano for 4 years. I knew how to read music. I was dying to get an electric guitar. I wanted an electric guitar way earlier, but we had a piano. And my mom was like, well, stick to a piano and then maybe you'll get a guitar. I did my time. I served my sentence on piano lessons, playing, the Marine marching hymn or whatever I had to play is so horrible. I played the Hill Street Blues theme, if that dates me any at a recital. Good grief. Welcome to your mid-40s. So I got my electric guitar, and within 6 months, Guns N' Roses, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Metallica Black Album, Smashing Pumpkins, Alice in Chains, those seminal albums were released the 6 months following me getting an electric guitar at 12 years old in 1991. So those are the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Under the Bridge, all that was in the same year. And so I go back to those and I listen to those a lot, driving, hanging out, doing emails, and that kind of gets me in the right headspace. But it's hard to find 4 to 5 hour blocks to come up with ideas and game plans. So one of the things I tell people is like, if you're really creative, it's hard to be a creative part-time. So you have to live like a creative when it comes to like collecting and noticing things. So that's where I tell people like, man, I've got this built up well from the reps I got at church. So playing in a church band for someone who really doesn't like church music a whole lot, I was the guy showing up. I actually did this once for a whole year. I tried to play a different instrument every time I played for an entire year. Now they were all bass related, but it was either a different bass or keyboard. I never repeated. I was always trying to be, how can I push myself to do weird stuff? And when you do that, you get this well of like, oh, I know how to make some really weird noises. And there was a stretch at church where we didn't have a keyboard player. Like we didn't have any volunteers that played keys. And so I learned how to play like organ sounds and pad sounds from my bass through my pedals because it was needed. It's how we introed songs, and that's how people could talk while it wasn't just quiet. And so I can make some really, really weird sounds from my bass that I learned at church messing around. So when I show up to a studio, I have all these tools that no one's heard before. And I'm like, hey, you could start a song with this. And I start making a sound. And he's like, that's your bass? And you're like, yep. And I don't tell him it's because we were missing keyboard volunteers at church 2 years ago that I stumbled upon this. But they're like, dude, that is so weird. And I've never heard that sound and no one would know it was from bass. Let's absolutely follow that down whatever rabbit trail we get to. So you can't, you know what I mean? You have to have reps and stuff and fight for it where you can so that when you get into the studio, you don't have 3 ideas. Because my biggest fear, if people could see this, they would laugh. Like sometimes you sit down on the first day, and this just happened to me 2 weeks ago. and they're like, "Hey, what kind of drum loops or stuff that we can start with, an idea, a beat, a vibe that we can start writing around." And so you just start playing stuff on off your laptop. You plug your laptop in through the big speakers and you just start playing stuff. And the first one is just like boom, boom, tick, boom, boom. And you're just like, okay, next. And my biggest fear is getting to the end of that list before someone says, "Oh, that's cool. Let's work on that." So I have to make that list infinite. No idea is a bad idea. When I come up with an idea or a sound, I'm like, save that in that bank for this artist, for that artist. Because my biggest fear is getting to the end of that list and them going, "Oh, okay, well, maybe we'll just try something new here then." And you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, we've been here an hour." Because they go
Yeah.
so fast. Something
Yeah.
that took you 4 hours to come up with, they listen to for 8 seconds
Yeah.
and go, "Nah, no, I'm not feeling it." And you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that was my best one." So there's some
Yeah.
of that. I'm a preparer. I'm an over preparer. So I think that suits me well in this kind of environment. From trying to turn off work and go into music, I try to still be as prepared as I would for work.
Yeah.
Um, and again, that doesn't mean that the whole thing could collapse on you and they don't use any of these things. But again, I just don't want to show up and it look like I had 5 ideas and
Yeah.
we got to the end of those 5 and now we're just kind of looking at each other,
Yeah.
you know?
Um, that's good. I mean, a couple of things. One is for those watching on YouTube, when I do concerts in this office, I'll use the curtains. Uh, for
But not
shows,
during the game.
in the game, no, I'm just gonna let the sun come in.
This show is sponsored by Jerry Jones. I don't know if you
Mhm,
guys know that, and he refuses to put up curtains. So
yeah,
Kent is at the mercy of what Jerry wants to do, and he can't have curtains.
yeah, and we
He's
might
gonna get
lose.
blinded.
Yeah, I
He's
might
gonna get
lose
blinded in a minute and lose a question.
lose a question in the air, and I just
What are we
anyway.
gonna do? Hey, but
But the second thing is, it's more important than that, is the application I hear for people, because again, a lot of our audience, from what I understand, are people that have full-time jobs
mm,
similarly to what you have, and that are, but they're creatives at heart. It just is, they may not be how they make their money and, how they
mhm,
put food on the table all the time, but that's what they do. So the application is, I do think there's an identity, that part of your identity, which we've talked about with Jamie and some other shows a little bit here and there, is that, as a creative, like, bring that all the time in every space, like, you're constantly thinking, like, what is happening, at home? We've talked about how being a parent is creativity. There's so much creativity in being a parent, or what you're going to cook, and
mhm,
what ingredients are going to be there. I would even say, although I'm not good at this part, like problems with plumbing, and what's the creative solution to it. Now for me, that one is call for help, but there are some people who are wired to where they can fix things. Same thing at work, like, there's a problem going on with the deal. Is there another way to solve it that maybe we haven't historically done? But I'm like, well, there might be a different approach here. And
mhm,
so, as we're doing that, then when we get to these very, I would say, like, clear expressions of creativity, when we think of that word, like music, making music, it's not something that we're like, oh, now I got to get back to that. It's something I've been living in,
mm,
the whole time. And so what I hear you saying is, like, you're always trying to think about that, like going, "Oh, this just hit me." And even though it hit me, in family time, there's a creative expression of that in music too. So I'm going to put it in my journal, put it in my
yeah,
notes app, do a little voice memo, whatever. And I'm filling up the hard drive. And the hard drive could literally be a hard
be a
drive,
hard
or
drive.
or it might be a journal.
Yeah,
But we've referenced the commonplace book before. It's just
mhm,
some place where you're putting all these observations, questions, ideas, thoughts,
yeah,
and getting those down, so that when you go into an actual expression of creativity, that is, I shouldn't say actual, into like a expression of fine arts creativity that a lot of our audience is trying to do, writing, music, film, photography, whatever, that stuff is right there, and it's not you're not having to just go right switch into that gear. So
Yeah, the few things I do is one, I'm a hobbyist, and so my creativeness, like you said, man, I'm making the kids sandwiches and lunches and doing weird stuff. I'm a photographer. I love film stuff, and bring me back to that because I met a guy in LA that was really interesting last week.
hmm, yeah.
Um, I bake, which is probably a huge shock to anyone on this thing. Like I baked a pecan pumpkin upside down cake yesterday. I don't know, it's just weird, and all of those things help me, and I'm listening to music while I do most of them. But I have a journal, and I'm not a journaler. Er, I don't like write down my thoughts, but I write down ideas, and it's a really weird journal. It's like I love collecting stickers and things. So when I get stickers from bands or places that I go, I put them in there, and I put them on blank pages, like 10 pages away. Like I went to the observatory in LA because I had some time off to walk around up there, and it's just so beautiful. And you have the whole view of LA and the Griffin Observatory, and it's so much fun. And I just buy 5 or 6 postcards that have that view, and I stuff those in there. And so when I write lyrics or come up with ideas or think of something I want to try one day, it's also mixed in with all these experiences that you've had and stickers from bands and that night. Then you start thinking about that night and whoever you went to that show with, or you know what I mean? It's just like it's almost like a little scrapbook more than a journal of your experiences and things that you're doing. I print out special photos even sometimes from my phone, real small, and tape those in there. And even the tape, I use like that Japanese paper tape, and I bought a bunch of them on Amazon. And so a whole roll of them, it came with like 50 different colors. And so even the colors I'm using to tape them into my thing, it's just kind of, I don't know, trying to spark those things you've been collecting, those experiences and memories creatively and other people's creative creation that, you know, could just put you in a good spot.
Yeah.
But the tie-in that I would encourage people that I think I would have underestimated from my work life to my creative life is the relational aspect. So my business side that I've done for 20 years is I mean, I would say it's 95% relational. It is the relationships you have with your clients who you're buying and selling to and from that you have worked with for years and years and years. And they become really good friends. Um, and yeah, more than business clients, and you know about each other's lives and kids, and you hang out and you just also do business together. And it's about asking questions and getting to know them more than on a work level. So this is for oil and gas, right? It's the same exact thing in music. The studio is the weirdest place ever. It's like 3 to 4 people in a very quiet, weird room. There's like one couch in there. So you might even be sitting next to each other. If you can't talk to people and talk something other than what's in front of you. In other words, I've met guys in the oil business, and as we're trying to work or do a deal, maybe we go to a football game, maybe we go to lunch. Um, all they talk about is oil. And even sometimes even more narrow focus than that, they just want to talk about the deal on the table that we are discussing and beat it up. And those guys are not fun to do business with because we're going to get there. We're going to figure all this stuff out, especially if you've been doing it 20 years. We actually don't need to talk about all the little minutia there. So what's going on with your kids, man? You know, you're a
Yeah.
Houston fan. That's horrible. You know what I mean? And we just,
Yeah.
what are you listening to? Do you guys go to concerts? So it's the same in the studio. If you're just showing up to talk about the newest software or the Pro Tools update, or have you gotten this new plugin that makes your bass sound bigger? They're like, dude, we'll get to that. And actually, that's why the engineer guy's here. Like, we're talking about life, and
Yeah.
you have to be able to be relational. And sometimes with people you've never met before. So it's like that awkward, you met them at a work function and you see his name tag and you're like, I actually need to talk to that guy because there's potential business opportunity here. How do you break the ice? How do you be normal? How do you crack a joke? And it's the same. It's the same in the studio. And so you're nervous going in. I hate small talk. And so you got to have to learn how to break through small talk into fun talk and relational stuff. But that's what I did all last week in LA. It was all these studio jobs. And it was, I mean, you're meeting engineers and the guys who run the studio and even the assistants that'll get coffee and wires or a snare drum that you need to go rent. And you've never met these people before. And so if it's all business, you're just not getting called back a lot. I always say that in oil. It's like, and in music, we've said this all the time. I mean, when Phil Lesh died of the Grateful Dead not too long ago, he didn't play bass when he joined the band to be a bass player. He played guitar. And they were like, yeah, but we like Phil. Phil can learn bass. He'll be fine. And I've done that a million times. If you're an Olympian at your instrument and a jerk, nobody wants you in their band at all. That's how Taylor Hawkins got the gig as the drummer for the Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl's like, I just like Taylor.
Mm.
Like, you need to cancel your other jobs until we can get Taylor into the band, right? Like, so it comes down to getting jobs and having relationships. Are you a fun hang too? Is a weird part of the creative process. Because as we've talked about, the creative process is so hard and can be so intimidating and so weird that imagine also trying to do it with a jerk.
Mm.
And that is
Yeah.
a killer. It's the cancer in the locker room. It's the, man, somehow we just won a football game, but that guy is miserable because he didn't
Yeah.
get enough catches, or,
Yeah.
he's trashing his locker over there. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want that dude on your team. And so I try to tell people that's, again, it's hard to put a percentage on it, but it's like, in other words, I could show up and be a fun dude and be the class clown and be horrible at my instrument, and I'm also not going to get the call back.
Yeah.
So it's a balance, but you can't be the weird, shy, quiet dude in the corner,
Yeah. So
which,
what's if you're, some of these people that you've worked with, or people that have been nominated for Grammy Awards, and it's they're front line too, they're the
mm,
person who's a singer-songwriter, they're kind of so they have they're gonna have a presence about them in the studio. What is it like trying to say, here's my creative idea that I really, I'm for it. That line between pushing that with confidence and then going, but this is your album or this is your
mm,
song, like what is that interplay like for you?
I try to introduce it slowly. So I never hold on to an idea. I try to, again, like showing them something from a hard drive, showing them something from like a couple iPad apps that help me make loops. And so I'm literally, you look so dumb. I'm like holding an iPad and like they plug it in so they can hear it. And I'm just doing this. I look so, it's just, again, it's not my early 90s dream of being a rock star. Like Axl Rose doesn't hold an iPad, and, it's like, uh, I've missed it, but whatever. So I never get, like, if someone passes on an idea or they hear it and it's my favorite part, I think they will love it. I wrote it just for them and I'm playing it and they're like, yeah, I just go, cool. And you just move on, because that gets to stay in the bucket in the hard drive for the next artist you work for.
Which,
It's not depleted.
is the chain smoker story we talked about in the pilot
Yeah,
episode. It
100%.
just,
It
even though
hangs
what's
around.
funny that it happened, the one that was discarded was by a church band,
Right.
then picked up by one
Yeah.
of the most successful songs of the last few years.
So it's that kind of thing. And then again, the relational side, I am trying to always gauge the room. Especially if I've never worked with this person or ever met them before. I worked with one this last week that I don't even have like really mutual friends with. So normally I can get a good idea, talk to someone, and like, oh, he's a nightmare in the studio. I get a heads up. This I had nothing. I was going in blind. And so I have a lot of ideas because, I borrow. Be, like we talked about with like the stuff with Let's Play Hurdle. I've just been obsessed with music and magazines, and I've read every episode, every magazine of like Rolling Stone, Spin, Guitar World, Guitar Player, Bass Player. It has music I was just in from like 1990 to out of college in the early 2000s. That's what people would get me for Christmas. I'd read every single interview. And then the internet's only made that worse. You just read them like crazy. So you pick up on people's processes. And like Justin Meldal Johnson's one of my favorite bass players. He's a bass player for Beck, and he was Beck's musical director for a long time. Now he produces big stuff like M83, Paramore. He's played with Nine Inch Nails. He's amazingly creative and incredibly good at bass, and a wonderful producer and engineer. The guy is just top of the pops to me. And so when you read about how he makes bass lines or comes up with noises in the late 90s with Beck, you put that down. Like, why wouldn't I try that? And so one of the things I'm doing is always trying to do something new. My goal is to make a sound that is cool. I don't make weird sounds for weird sound sakes. I try to make weird sounds that make you bob your head or become a hook. So I also want other musicians or people in the room to not know how I did it. Like if they heard it only, they'd go, "What is that? What did you use for that?" That's like the ultimate compliment versus, "Oh, that's a bass going through this plugin," which is one of my biggest problems with church music. I can tell your pedal board and what you're playing from the back of the church because everyone plays the same things. They share settings. Worship musicians sell their presets to other churches to use so you can sound just like them. That is my worst nightmare. So what I'll do, again, with all these pedals, these pedals are made for guitar, almost 90% of them. I'll use them on bass. And again, sometimes I've modded them, which means opening them up, trying to figure out how to use a soldering iron and mod them for bass. And I'll put them on keyboards. I put them in the orders. There's a specific order that you'll hear guitar junkies talk about. Oh, your compression has to come before your distortion. And then this is always at the end. And never put your reverb before your preamp. I don't listen to any of them. I don't listen to anything like that. It makes no sense to me. I don't care. Again, if you're trying to duplicate someone else's tone, then yes, those things are important. If you're trying to create something new, it means nothing. So I will literally put 4 or 5 different pedals in the little tub that I bring the pedals in and shake it up and throw it on the ground. And then just start plugging them in whatever order they landed, plug it into a guitar, a bass, or a keyboard, and usually tell someone, hey, just start, man, literally, if you only know the C chord on the piano, that's fine. Just kind of hit it over and over for me. And you just start messing with knobs until you start dialing in, and you have no idea what's going to happen. Some of these pedals aren't supposed to be next to each other. And so they're feeding back, or they're conflicting, or things are cutting in and out and being weird. And then all of a sudden you just go, ooh, that is a weird, happy mistake. And then I have to take pictures with my iPhone so I remember my settings or write them down in my book. And you see them going, yeah, on paper, that's a bass overdrive and some reverb you bought off Etsy, and that some guy modded a kid's toy that when you turn its head now, it makes weird noises. And you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, you've got something. Yeah. And then we just go with it. Yeah. But I don't start there. Yeah. If I started by walking in and dumping out pedals and plugging in and making noises, they're like, oh, this dude's going to be, it's going to be a long week.
Yeah.
So you got to feel them out.
In that there's again, a theme we've talked about during Make It Share It has been the idea of remixing. There's nothing new under the sun. So we're remixing and, trying different things and putting them together in different ways. And when you were talking, it made me think about artificial intelligence, and, just continues to be a big discussion point for culture and definitely for creativity. For me as a writer, lately working on a few scripts, there are times where you might bump over there and go, all right, I'm going to prompt this AI to help me just like compile almost like research, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think the best use of it is like, give me some research in this topic, in this area, but I'm going to take all that and I'm going to come back over and remix and kind of start trying different things, right? And that I think is a good use of a tool like AI. It almost becomes a commonplace, like a world commonplace book, because that's all it's doing. It's just
Mm,
like looking across the entire internet, training itself on what's there, and then you have access to it. So there's a poor use of that where you go over to it and say, write this for me.
right,
That's how we don't want to do it,
right.
because that is what's going to come out like just some very generic stuff
Yeah,
or things that just don't even make sense in any way. The good use of it is you can, I think, if you prompt it right, to consider it as a researcher for you. And maybe again, it's kind of like when we just which I was about to say back in the day when we just Googled.
yeah,
That just shows you like, whoa. But it's like, it's a form of that. So that's more of just like an aside for those who are like, what do I do with AI? How do we work with it? My take is that it is not evil. It's a tool. It's how
yeah,
you use it. And so I think in the ways that you've been talking about having this hard drive, I think it just made me think about, for those out there wondering about AI, this is like a good example to me of like where you could use it to help you in a good way. Just don't use it to actually do the creativity part, to
mm,
go write
yeah,
the song, write the code, write the script. Don't do that. So that was more just an
yeah.
aside as you were talking. So, yeah.
Um, so I met a guy. So the actor Jason Lee, right? My
Oh
Name is
yeah.
Earl.
Oh yeah.
A lot of Kevin
This is the
Smith
photo.
movies.
Is this what you
Oh,
wanted to come back to?
yeah,
Yeah.
Almost Famous.
Yeah.
That's probably he's my favorite role, I think, in Almost Famous as the the overshadowed lead singer. I'm just a blur on a t-shirt. That guy is so great. He
Man,
has a
that movie's incredible. Yeah.
It's great. He's a huge photographer and very into film. And he has a camera store now in Eagle Rock, near LA. Little that they sell cameras, they do developing, they sell photography books. He releases photography books. I have a couple. He drives, like he'll get an old like Grand Prix, and him and his friend will drive it from Texas to California, going through dirt towns, ghost towns, small towns, and taking pictures of just landscapes and things going on. They use large format cameras. I mean, they are not messing around. So my grandfather's photography book, that's a crazy old story of itself. Of all of his photography, I wanted to give him a copy because his photography is so much like my grandfather's. And I was like, if anyone could ever appreciate this, it would be Jason Lee. I didn't expect him to be there. I was going to drop it off with a note because we have a ton of these copies of this book, which we have to tell that story one day. Diane Keaton, the actor, made a book of my grandfather's photography,
That's
which
incredible.
is insane. So it's a really nice book because Diane Keaton and her people did it. And so it's just Fort Worth in the 30s through the 60s. Everything that happened in Fort Worth. My grandfather had a photography shop there. So I show up. There's no one in the store but Jason and Ray, the owners. And it's Jason Lee. It's
Yeah.
Earl.
Yeah.
And I mean, he couldn't have been nicer. I give him the book. He instantly is like, rips it out of the plastic. We sit down and we just start going through it. And this dude knows his stuff. He's like, oh, I can tell right here. He's shooting on a 4x5 film and blah, 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 blah. This is amazing. And we're just talking. And it was amazing. We talked for an hour. I took a photo, but of course it was on a film camera. So once it's developed, which it's I sent it off to get developed. Maybe we can put
That's
it in the
awesome.
show notes.
There you go.
He just talked about his process. It's like, man, how did you get into photography? Because he knows his stuff. Film, like if you told him, hey, like I said, yeah, I have this old Lomo camera that I'm bringing around LA right now taking pictures. He's like, it's the LCA, the LC4, the LC121. Yeah, and you're just like, how do you know the catalog of Lomo? And he's like, oh yeah, no, you know what I mean? He knows his
Yeah.
stuff. And he was like, just acting. He's like, a lot of times when you're sitting around on set, all you hear is technical talk and the lenses. And the lenses, you're like, why are they switching out lenses right now? Why are they bringing in different cameras? And he's like, you just started to ask questions and learn secondhand. And then it kind of develops an interest and then you're doing it. So it was interesting to me that he started as a skateboarder and that's where he got fame.
Mm-hmm.
That bled into acting, like almost as an accident. He's always been around music. He's known Beck for forever. Um, he loves music, everything from jazz to punk. Now he does photography. He owns a store. He releases books. He teaches the local colleges. They come to his store, and he teaches 18 and 19-year-olds how to load a camera. And so it was just a cool way, again, that I think a lot of times with creatives, I hate when I have to answer the question of like, oh, so what are you doing in LA? Because I used to, for a long time, when people would ask me like at church, I'd say I'm a bass player. And that's how I identified.
Hmm.
But that is like 1/100th of the things I like to do. And I probably do that about 1/100th of my creative time is actually physically play a bass guitar.
Yeah.
And so you look at like Jason Lee, it's like he's a creative. He's an actor, skateboarder. His wife makes clothes and owns a clothing shop next door. Like they are just making film, developing it themselves, curating it into books, teaching.
Yeah.
And so I left going, yeah, that's kind of the life I want also.
Yeah.
Like photographer, musician, baker, whatever,
Yeah. Well, it's
drawing. And so,
exactly what we're talking about specific
yeah,
with Jamie is you're not what you do.
yeah,
There's the deeper part of it is just who you are,
yeah,
what your essence is. And so for Jason in that example, there's obviously part of him that is creative, and that may be as a skateboarder at first and how he's doing moves and tricks, and he's interested as a kid of like, oh, if I turn the board this way, if I flip it that way, when there's artistic expression in that. But then it moves into photography, and
mhm,
now that creativity is going to be, oh, if I do a light this way, if the aperture's here, if the focus is there, if it's this L5 versus an L1. And then it moves into a business, a record
yeah,
store, a place where he can teach kids how to load you just see the point is, like, man, this is so big for all of us, is like, you just are not what you do. You're not
yeah,
distilled down. So I think especially if you feel stuck in how you make money right now, and
mhm,
it's how you make money. It just doesn't define
yeah,
all that you are. So that's the takeaway for me in that.
yeah. I always find it's funny because I kind of had some back to back trips in the last month from the oil side and then the music side, and they were extremes on both sides. When I had longer hair, I cut it all off in LA. Longer hair confuses the oil guys, right? So they get a look at me and they know I'm not wearing a quarter zip, and I'm just the short hair.
Yeah. It's the
And so
modern
they
day suit and
know,
tie is the quarter
yes, the
zip.
modern day suit,
Mhm.
business cash. And I'm
Mhm.
like, so what do you do? Like, there's something here. I'm like, I'm a musician. And they're like, that makes sense. But it's weird to the oil guys. They're primarily not musicians. And then when I'm in the music studio and you're doing music and you have long hair and you're wearing almost everything you wear is from Vans, like you're 12 years old still, and you're just sitting there working on music, and then somehow the conversation or something comes up. It might be that I have to jump out and take a phone call, and I come back in and they find out that you have 20 years in a publicly traded oil business. You just see their mind explode because that's as foreign to them as playing an instrument is to the oil and gas guys. And so I've always felt like I've had to identify one or the other. I'm living my oil world or I'm living my creative world. And as I've gotten older, I just don't care. And now everybody knows I'm both or more than that. And
Yeah.
I don't try to dress and play oil guy anymore. And I don't try to dress and play musician guy anymore.
Yeah.
I just do me and I'm way happier and I don't have to keep track of anything,
Yeah.
you
No,
know?
it's integrity, right? It's
Yeah.
you're an integrated person instead of disintegrated person. So
Yeah.
I love that. I do want to move and finish with the sharing part in all of
Yeah.
this journey, because there's again, as we talk about in these studio sessions, you're not in the band, you're not the frontline singer
Mm.
songwriter that's going to be on the cover of the album. You're not usually you're not touring. I know you have some, but it's just not like the typical thing. You've come in to work with them in the studio space. So that's an it makes me think of The Prestige, which I think we've referenced before, but just
Mm,
I mean, incredible movie about movies. Even
yeah.
though it's not like literally about movies, it's about magic. But you see movies, but you also see the for any of us that have desired the applause to say, okay, that validates me. The applause of the crowd is what will finally put
Mhm.
me at peace. That movie will just have
Yeah,
fun
that'll mess
with
you up.
that. It'll mess you up. And one of the, without spoiling it, just signature scenes is seeing the master magician underneath the stage, and the person that he has used to do the trick is on the stage. And so the crowd is going nuts, and you see him, we get a shot of him under the
Mhm.
stage where nobody can see him by himself. And he's like basking in the adulation of this crowd, but they don't know it's him. So if he walked out, it's like you
No one
don't know
knows.
it's him. No one knows. So that's the role that you're playing, in these. And I'm not saying you've like
No, I
orchestrated the
get it.
whole thing, but
Yeah.
I'm saying you've played a part in it, but no one will know you're the guy under the stage. So what is it like to share in that? And as you move into that, you've made this work, with great artists, and then it's like what happens from there. And you were talking pre-roll a little bit about, so maybe that's a good example of just like how you could work on something that it just like, I don't know what's going to happen with this.
That's a big part. This is something that was taught to me, when I got advice for the Chainsmoker deal, and it's the best advice I've gotten, and it led into my personality. I don't do things for trophies. I and I'm not bagging on people that do. I've never cared about trophies. I don't have a shelf for it, is the joke. You give me a trophy, I go, "Thanks," and then I'm on to the next thing. But the way I say it, and the thing that I think about a lot, is don't chase the third thing. We make things, we share things. The third thing is, and I better get praise for it, or let's see how well it does, or how much did I make from it? And if you chase the third thing at all, in my experience for myself and the people around me, it won't end well. And it will corrupt that whole process. Because then, if you're chasing the third thing, then the creating and the sharing now can lose all its meaning and power, because the third thing's what rules if you mess with it. So I work on stuff. I have these fun moments. I never know if it's going to even make it to an album. You can sell a script and never know if it's ever going to be a movie. And that's reality. That's more likely that's going to happen than something ever makes the light of day. So I never chase the third thing. And even when sharing, when the third thing happens, like Grammy nominations or a Grammy win, I share it with probably the same people and the same kind of people that I would share if I wrote a new song or had a cool part or something happened. So, like, Kent and Lauren are going to get a text like, "Guys, we just got nominated for this." I'm not going to put it on stuff for everybody. Like, even my family, I think my wife told my family. So my moms and my sisters like, "What? What happened? How come he didn't tell me?" It's like, I just don't like to talk about it. Because I also know myself. And I think if I chased the third thing at all, I would chase the third thing super hard. And then I would try to prepare for it. How do I prepare and manipulate whatever I'm working on so that it does make sure that the third thing kicks in, whether that's money or fame or whatever it is? And then being a bass player, other than Paul McCartney, who I love, we like to hide in the back and sit next to the drummer. And we're the glue. They always call it the glue position. We have to do what the drummer's doing. We have to be also playing the notes and the key that the guitars and keys are playing. And we can't step on the melody of the singer. So you're listening to everything, and everyone else affects what you play and vice versa as a bass player. But in most people's favorite bands, the bass player is the one guy they have no idea what his name is. And so there's something about my personality trait that also leans into that. I like that role. I don't want to be the lead guitarist putting his foot up on the speaker and giving you this. I'm looking down and I'm bobbing my head and I'm just playing bass. And so that also leads into, like, I love that my face and name isn't on these projects. I use fake names, which was the advice that I got. I have publishing under different names. My first name is not Steven, which most people don't know. It's the best kept secret in the world. And the first name, my actual first name, has like 50 different variations it could have. It's like one of the plainest names in American English history. So yeah, you'll never know. You could be looking straight at my name and you wouldn't click that that's Stephen Cooper. And it's worked out really well. And I'm glad I got that advice. And yeah, so when the third thing comes, it's fun, but it's literally like a dinner. Like that night, me and that artist, when we got some nominations, we went to a Laker game and we sat in seats that were closer than we ever should have sat in a Laker game and got to see some really fun, crazy people. I was 2 seats away from Flea. I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. I can't interrupt him and beat him down. But like,
Yeah.
that's what we did. And then we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You know? And we celebrated by watching basketball, which that's a weird thing, but it's like, it made sense to both of us who love basketball.
Well, does it, because as you were talking, I was like, you're like the Mark Vidal of music. And
That's funny.
ladies and gentlemen, that's a 2021 Baylor National Championship deep cut. And I don't care.
It's a deep cut.
I don't care.
I'm
not using Daryl Moose Johnston for my example. I'm using Mark, the villain, Vidal, as the glue guy that Coop is in the studio. So
heck yeah.
You can even see a little bit like the picture of the champions right behind me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's super helpful.
I would say the piece that most people miss in the sharing is sharing it to people that are around them, even that aren't quote unquote in the business, like friends. This is what I'm working on. Hey, I kind of did this and I thought it was cool. Hey, I play bass on this song. Check it out. And it's not like a blind email. It's people that you would actually text and write a new text when you send it to them because they're your friend.
Yeah.
And you're not sending it to 100 people. You're sending it to 10.
Yeah.
That's the piece that I think people miss. They feel like they need to share it to a record label or the local radio stations. That's fine too, but just don't expect anything to happen. Again, if you're sharing it with them because you're expecting the third thing, it's going to start to make you miserable because you're never going to hear back from those people. Hopefully the people that you're sending it to can provide you with actual feedback because they're the 10 people that can go, dude, that's the weirdest thing you've ever done. Or, man, I love that. Is it going to do anything? You know, who's that with? And then when you do have a third thing or a celebration, it's those same 10 people that you're reaching out to be like, hey, remember that thing? It totally hit 5 years later. And it's kind of fun, you know, or it's in this movie. That's fun, you know.
Yeah.
Or more realistically for me, it's in a very unknown MTV show. I get on MTV shows all the time. And when I read the title, I'm like, what has happened to our MTV? It's such a mess.
Yeah.
But
this is good, man. I hope this is helpful for everyone. Also, I've almost achieved a life goal. I've almost become one with the Force. If I get
you are lit up
15 more minutes, man, I will be there and I'll be able to talk to Anakin and Obi-Wan and just kind of understand what in the world.
How hot are you right now? Like, is your body temperature? Like, I feel like
I'm okay. The t-shirt's helping.
Okay.
So yeah,
I keep watching the level.
Yeah,
I just wanted to talk long enough until it hit you here, and you're just like absolutely blinded.
I really, it's just Qui-Gon taught me how to do it. So I mean, I'm going into Baylor deep cuts, Star Wars deep cuts.
We're off.
All right,
we're off the
We
tracks.
need Lauren to rein this stuff in.
We absolutely
it's going to get
Lauren.
too much. Well, on that note, we will be back with a guest soon and with Lauren. So hopefully, again, you guys have enjoyed this KWBU reunion. DJ Riddell, DJ Kanish. So thanks, Coop.
Yeah, man. It's great talking to you, brother.
Likewise. All right. We'll catch you guys next time on Make It Share It.
You see here, kid? You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just gotta bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump. And you might think, what if I fall? Well, what if you don't?